Today we are going to talk about the difference between a native and a non-native plant and learn the basic morphology and life history of 10 of the most common native plants used in landscaping. And then we're going to give you some tools on how to research and learn more about these things. So a native plant. A plant that has evolved in a given place over a period of time sufficient to develop complex and essential relationships with the physical environment and other organisms in a given ecological community. What the heck does that mean, right? So when talking about those complex and essential relationships, we're talking about things like the relationship between monarch butterflies and milkweed. So monarch butterflies will only lay eggs on milkweed. Monarch caterpillars will only eat the leaves of milkweed. Without milkweed, no monarch butterflies. So this has happened because these two have existed in the same natural community over thousands of years, and they've adapted to one another. So milkweed is toxic. That caterpillar, over thousands of years, has adapted to that toxicity. It can tolerate it. It actually imbues itself with it to help protect itself from predators like birds. The tiny caterpillar, when it first comes out of an egg, it's about the size of a pencil point. And that little caterpillar has to chew through these tough, milky, sappy leaves. And so they've developed a stronger jaw to do that. Milkweed has a strong tie to its community, and it would be missed if it were to leave. Those are the types of complex and essential relationships we're talking about. So a non-native plant is one that was introduced, whether it was intentional or accidental, to a new place outside of its natural home range and did not evolve with local plants or wildlife. You hear words like exotic or alien. Those are all synonyms for non-native. And I modified that definition from the Missouri Invasive Plant Council. And the important thing to remember here is that non-native plants that are introduced to a new place have not existed long enough to develop those complex and essential relationships. For example, who here has heard of butterfly bush? Right? It's gorgeous. The butterflies love it. It's covered in butterflies. But if you look closely, you see that the leaves, they're intact. There's no holes in those leaves. There's no bugs on those leaves whatsoever. That's because our local insects don't recognize it as food. That plant has come from Asia. We introduced it here in the horticultural industry. And it's really pretty, and butterflies get nectar from it, but it's not creating new butterflies. Then we take a look at our native... If we take a look at our native milkweed species, you see this horrifying sight of aphids and caterpillars and all kinds of things eating those leaves. That plant can be eaten to the ground, and that makes me so happy to see when I see it in my garden, because I know that plant is doing its job. I heard someone say it over there. How do we know if a plant is native? Well, we've studied them. We've studied people who existed here for thousands of years. Native Americans, plants are integral to their culture. So by learning about what they've learned through time, through passing those stories down, they use plants in their ceremonies for food, for healing. All of that is data for what plants existed before early settlers came. And also, scientists have done a lot of genetic research, so we've learned the genetic origins of a lot of plants. Do we know the origins of all plants? No, but we're working on it. So I often get a question about how native does it have to be? There is a spectrum of how native something is. For example, this plant, false aloe, it's native to North America. It's native to the state of Missouri, but it is not native to Boone County. Is it okay to plant it in my yard? Any guesses? Yeah, Dee says yes. I say yes too if your goal, like mine, is for your garden to make you happy. It's okay. Now, if I were to restore a natural glade in Boone County, which is false aloe, that's the native habitat that it comes from, but only in the southern part of the state, then I would say that it would be inappropriate to put false aloe in the seed mix for that restoration project, because my goal for that project is to restore it to its natural state. So it comes down to your goals. Best practice is to source plants that the seed is harvested from as close as you as possible. So I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And this spring, my mom came to visit for a month, and we had a wonderful time. And of course, we talked about plants in the garden. And she said, Danielle, please, can I have some of your milkweed and put it and bring it home? I said, yes, because she's my mom, and you don't want to say no to her. But it's never worked out well for me. And I said, yes, but why don't we take a look and find a native plant retailer near you in Pittsburgh, because my Missouri-grown milkweed, even though it is native to Missouri and Pennsylvania, my milkweed is far less likely to survive the longer, colder, harsher winters of Pennsylvania. And so that's what we did. She planted it, and that's her garden, and that's my garden. Learning how to identify plants is frustrating. It's hard. It's a huge learning curve. And learning those botanical names and terms, it can really turn a person off from this, right? Who's here? Who has been frustrated by that at one point? Yeah, the Latin, it's important, but it's challenging. And we just need to recognize that and take it one piece at a time. So resources that I recommend for getting started are grownative.org. So Grow Native is part of the Missouri Prairie Foundation. And on their website, they have an excellent native plant database where you can type in the criteria. Say you have a sunny clay soils spot in your yard. You put in those criteria, and up will pop a list of native plants that would work in those conditions. So, it should work. They also have a lot of information about where to buy native plants, where our local retailers are at. They have a whole resource guide, plethora of information. They're always doing webinars. It's a great place to start your learning journey. I personally really love these two guides, The Prairie Wildflowers and Ozark Wildflowers by Don Kurtz. It's just you take those books, you go out, and you start looking at plants. And that's honestly, that's how I've taught myself. I went to school for ecology for a while, and we never went out and just identified plants, believe it or not. And then Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy. This book helps you understand the relationship, those complex and essential relationships, and just how complex and essential they are in a very digestible manner. So it's a good place to start learning about these things. Now, if you want to get a little more advanced and learn about individual plants and what their known home range is, then check out the USDA Plants Database. And of course, we have apps. We're in the modern world, apps. And some are better than others. In my opinion, you need to have a little bit of information to be able to really accurately use that application. I personally use iNaturalist. I think it's fun. You go out, you snap a picture, you post it, you say what you think it is, and then other people can give their identification. And so there's checks and balances. A lot of, in Columbia, we're really lucky. We have a lot of different agencies with a lot of different ecologists, the university, Department of Conservation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is here. We're all in Columbia, and so you have people who know this stuff that are on that app making these observations. It's a great place to learn. And find a mentor. Join a local organization. We have the Hawthorne chapter of the Missouri Native Plant Society in town, and the Wild Ones of Mid-Missouri chapter. These Groups of people, they go out, they visit prairies, they identify plants together, they do plant swaps, they visit each other's gardens. It's a good place to build camaraderie and learn from other people what mistakes they've made, and you know, that sharing of information, peer-to-peer learning. Okay, before we get into talking about different plants, let's take a minute and brainstorm what are your objectives for your landscape, and please share with the person sitting next to you. We'll just take a few minutes to do that.
So we talked about the difficulty that we're having with the drought, and I'm trying to establish a native garden, and I've started it a second time, and lost all my plants that I had last summer in spite of watering, and what a struggle that is with not getting a normal rainfall.
And what is normal, as far as our future? I don't know if you, right, I don't know if you're aware, but, global warming seems pretty real to me. So we got to consider that, in our future. You need to talk to Stan.
I can't tell you the exact. It's either Saturday or Sunday. MU extension. What?
Microphone,
Oh,
please.
yeah. I thought I could project as good as D. I could if I raised my voice. Anyway, this either Saturday or Sunday. I think it's Sunday, but I can't swear to it. I'd have to look online. But you can go to the Community Garden Coalition's website. We've got this information. There's going to be a talk on how to deal with drought in your garden, put on by MU Extension, out at, I think it's out at their UU place.
Yeah.
It's either Saturday or Sunday, and it's on our website. Yeah, I don't remember the exact date, but
Say the organization once again.
well, we're the Community Garden Coalition, and it's on our website. But MU Extension is the one who's given the talk, and it's specifically about dealing with drought in the garden. So,
Thank you. This is Kathy Doisy. She's our president of our local community garden coalition. I love her. Anybody else?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, I do need the microphone. Thank you for reminding me.
I have to hold both of them. Yes, no, I'm just kidding.
So my friend and I were talking about how we are wanting to diversify and maximize the biodiversity of our spaces, no matter how big or small they are, and that while we're spending our time out there, that oftentimes less is more. Letting things be and letting them do their normal, natural thing is like just being a steward of that, and how that makes us feel really connected in a way that is really hard to get anyplace else, and it's very, very special. And so that's what we were just talking about.
What was Danielle? Thank you, 'cause that is important. Danielle had to embrace the chaos. What were you saying?
Yeah, embrace the chaos of your garden.
Yep.
So my neighbor here and I, as in like my seat neighbor, not my living neighbor, we really discussed sort of the challenges that sometimes neighbors and neighborhoods that don't understand can create when we are trying to go native. I have a large side yard that is nothing but grass and relatively useless, and my goal is to change that. And I'm here to make sure that my neighbors that I live near are not going to complain.
So how do you do that? Do you have a talk with them, at the neighborhood association meeting, or do you?
You want me to answer that? Or?
Yes.
Oh, I am a teacher. I'm a rule follower. I'm my neighborhood association president, and so I share information with the neighbors. And before I maybe solarize a patch, I'll say, work in progress, beautiful things are coming, or just try to be positive and share that information.
I just want to ask people about, is it a moral dilemma that you want pretty things in your garden? I'm speaking right into it. Can you hear me now? Um, is it a moral dilemma that if you want pretty things in your garden that are not native, you can't have them? Or can you have a mix? Or what do people think about this?
I can answer that. No, you can have whatever you want in your garden because it's your garden. No. We're here, we're learning about sorry. Yeah, no, let's limit the invasives. We'll talk more about a lot of these things about neighbors and watering and drought in the design portion of the seminar series. But you can have what you want in your yard. Like I was talking about the false aloe, how it's not technically native to Boone County. I have it planted next to my mailbox because nothing else grows there, and I like it. And so it all comes down to your objectives. Now, if you are wanting to provide food and habitat for butterflies to create more insects and to support the natural community, then we need to use native plants to do that. If you want, you can do a mix. If you want something pretty on the side, they'll still provide nectar, but it's not producing more insects for the entire system. So we're just gonna go through some common plants. This is shining blue star, Amsonia illustris, and it's natively found on stream edges. If you've ever been to the Forum Nature area, it's all along there, at least when that filled up with water, drought. It can deal with a little bit of dryness, but in this prolonged drought that we've had, it hasn't really bloomed as it normally has in that natural environment. But in my yard, it is one of the first things that blooms in April. The bees love it. It is the centerpiece to my rain garden because everything else is little and ugly. And that comes up and it is like, bam. Oh. Yes, Wednesday, July 12th at 6 to 8 at the MU Extensions location off UU. Another exciting thing about Blue Star is it prefers poorly drained clay soils, which I'm sure, like my yard, your yards are just that. Cardinal flower is another one of those plants that loves poorly drained clay soils. It is a magnet for hummingbirds. This blooms later in the year. It should start blooming about now, and it'll go, far into October, November. It is, I think I already said this, but hummingbirds love it. They fight over it. That's how much they love it. And so it's a great piece to add to your rain garden. Anywhere where you have moist soils, cardinal flower is a great addition. Swamp milkweed. So we're really fortunate in Columbia to have 18 different species of milkweed are native to Missouri. So we have a lot of different choices as far as planting milkweed in a dry spot or a wet spot. Swamp milkweed, like its name, it prefers that swampy, marshy type habitat, so moist soils. Now, in my yard, it's kind of traveled around, and I never really know where it's gonna pop up. But that's kind of the exciting part of a native landscape, is they do their own thing. Tussock sedge. So sedges are great for creating a green mulch underneath some taller plants. So when I say green mulch, we're not actually putting wood chips down. These are just plants that create ground cover that are shading out the weeds and also keeping it a lot cooler in your yard. So tussock sedge, it prefers water. In my rain garden, I have it kind of on the side, and it hates it. So it's not as big and robust as this one, but it's still living because it has a really long root system. So it's reaching deep down into that clay soil. Dutchman's pipe vine is a very long vine. It can get up to 75 feet long. So it needs a really strong trellis, but it's really awesome because it is the host plant for the pipe vine swallowtail. And not only is it a host plant, but it is a super cool flower. This is the flower right here. It is the shape of a pipe, and this is the fruit. And you find it naturally along streams, in open woodlands. It's a wonderful thing to stumble upon in the woods. One of my favorites is blue wild indigo, Baptisia australis. So we put the botanical name on there because when you go shopping, that's what you need to look for. And we'll talk more about this in a later class, but there are all sorts of cultivars, so things that have been modified by humans for color or whatnot, and that affects their ecological ability to support the system. We'll talk about that later, but just so you know, that's why I have the scientific name on there. I love blue wild indigo because it's a spring bloomer. It's purple. My favorite color is purple. And it is also a legume, so it's fixing nitrogen in the soil. It's about 3 feet tall. It's shrub-like, and it's a burst of color in the early spring. It has taken probably 2.5 years for my plant to get to about half of that size in that picture. So it takes a while for it to mature. So patience is another thing. When doing native landscaping, you've got to wait for these things. It's not instantaneous. And it's also a host plant for these cute little sulfur butterflies. And my daughter loves to, in the wintertime, take the seed pods. They're on a long stem, and you take them off, and the seeds inside, they rattle. And so she rattles them and chases the dog around the yard. Partridge pea, which is my best friend. I have in a big pot over here, and that's all partridge pea in there. It is an annual, so it's just a 1-year thing, but it's a prolific seeder. And when the seed pods dry out, it is also a legume, so they're bean-like seed pods. And you can come up later and take a look. When the seed pods dry out and you touch them, they explode. And so there's literally partridge pea all over my yard, and I love it. And it's in my husband's vegetable garden, which is great because it's a nitrogen fixer, and so it's a terrific companion plant for vegetables. Also a host plant for these sleepy orange sulfurs. And it lives just about anywhere. Before we move on, this plant is growing between the cracks in my deck where dirt has collected. It is growing out of there. It grows anywhere. Oh, that's just it's an annual, so that's this year. And in the wild, you find it in a prairie. All those ground nesting birds, the grouse and stuff that we're losing, quail, they love to eat that seed. So prairie blazing star, it just likes my yard because of those clay soils. It needs rich soil. But it is one of those plants that is eye-popping. Butterflies will cover it. It's tall, and the flower is like a corn dog shaped, and they're very fine petals. And so it's just a really interesting piece to add to your landscape. Side oats grandma. Daniel, I need my helper. So side oats grandma is a terrific native grass. It's drought tolerant. Take some of these and show them to people, and let's show them the seeds. So it is, I said it was drought tolerant. It's also one that you can use as a native turf alternative. So you can mow this to about 4 inches, and it'll be like a turf grass. So it's a bunch forming plant, but it spreads through rhizomes, and so you'll get a nice ground cover.
Does it have a scent?
No scent, but the seeds are very interesting, and I like using it in bouquets. So it's called side oats because they kind of hang to the side. And when they're in bloom, they have kind of a red and yellow tinge to them. So it's, something pretty throughout the year. In the wintertime, they kind of get a coppery gold color. So it's something I leave up all year long.
There was a question about like toxicity.
Toxicity?
That word.
So I have a dog and a kid that eats everything in the yard, and I don't have any problem putting milkweed in it because they would have to eat a lot of it. Not to say that wild garlic and wild onions are more toxic to dogs. So you just I put those plants outside the fence area, but something to be aware of, but not something I lose sleep over. Rattlesnake master, one of my favorites, and I have one here to pass around. So this plant, typically it gets about 4 feet tall, but in a garden it can get about 5 or 6 feet tall if it's grown well. And it's spiky, so be careful when you touch it. But this is the flower part, and it has leaves that look more cactus-like, and that's to protect itself from herbivores. It is host plant to this rattlesnake master borer moth, which is a species of concern, meaning that its population has diminished to a point to where we're concerned it's going to be endangered. So it hasn't been listed yet, but it's on its way. So one way, it's because it requires a host plant, is to plant more rattlesnake master, preserve those natural habitats. Early settlers used it as a remedy for rattlesnake bites. Recent science doesn't really show any sort of effectiveness, so you should still go to a hospital. I'm sorry. Oh, no. Rattlesnakes, it doesn't attract rattlesnakes, so don't worry about that. Wild petunia, it is a tough plant. It is growing out of the road and sidewalk at my daughter's school. It is so tough. It loves terrible soil, drier, hotter the better, and it's a cute little plant. It's small, bushy, and these flowers, they'll bloom in the morning, and then they drop off in the day. So they're a one day of flower, one flower a day type thing. But there's several of them off the stem. You would typically find this in a glade habitat, which is, if you're not familiar, in an open woodland. It's at the highest peak in the hottest area. The soil is basically bedrock, and so they are adapted to living in terrible soils. If you were to put this plant in a nice, rich soil, it would die. So knowing your plant is the most important part about planting your garden. And it's a host to the common buckeye, which is a beautiful little butterfly. Rose verbena. In all the descriptions that you come across, they forget to mention how good it smells. It is a beautiful scent in the springtime when it is blooming, and in the summer and in the fall, because it blooms through all of that. So it's one of our native plants that bloom for a long time. So there's probably just a few of those that bloom for a long time. It's also a great ground cover. I like to plant it. I have it amongst my rattlesnake master, some of my grasses, and it just weaves its way in between with the native strawberries, creates a beautiful ground cover and a terrific smell. And it likes rocks and terrible soil. So. Cliff goldenrod, another one of my favorites. It is gorgeous when it is coming off the side of a wall because it flows down. It's like a waterfall of yellow in the fall. It is it's a bush-like plant. It doesn't get very tall like most of the goldenrods that we think of, but it spreads moderately through seed is what they say, but my yard is covered in it now. I use it as a border along my garden, my perennial beds, and it's so far in this drought, I haven't watered it at all, and it's green, it looks good, and I can't wait for the fall when those yellow blooms come out. Golden currant. This is a shrub, and it spreads through suckers, so it's great for creating a hedge or a screen between neighbors, and it smells like cloves in the springtime, which is super awesome. This one does not have thorns, and in the fall you get that beautiful red color. So you get yellow flowers, and then in the fall, beautiful red. So people like to plant burning bush. This is a great alternative to that. So burning bush is invasive. It's non-native and it's invasive, so it's escaped from the garden, and we find it out in our woodlands, and it doesn't have any of those essential and complex relationships. And so other plants, local native plants, they don't know what to do with it. I was practicing this presentation last night to my friend, and she said, non-native plants are like the person you invite to a party and you don't know them very well, and you invite them over to hang out with your friends, and then you realize they just don't click, and you're like, oh my gosh, when's it time? That's what non-native plants are like. You don't know if they're gonna upset the balance. And so burning bush is one of those that has come, and it's taking over our woodlands, much like bush honeysuckle and many other things. The berries, I haven't tried them, but I've had people compare them to Missouri gooseberry, which is very tart. Birds love them. Blue violet. Who has violets in their yard? You have a native plant. They are native, and they are host plants to these fuzzy little creatures. The great spangled fritillary butterfly, which I don't have a picture of the butterfly, but you see them everywhere. And that's because violets are so common. They're great ground cover. When my mom was visiting, she's like, why do you let them grow in here? I said, because they're awesome. Fragrant sumac. I need my helper, Dan, again. Oh, he's checking out the rattlesnake master. That's okay. Can I ask Eric for help? My supervisor, everybody. Just hand it out. I'll take one. Thank you. So aromatic sumac is found in woodlands. I was just at the Grindstone Nature area yesterday with the dog, and this stuff is all along the border, along the trail in the dog side. Yeah, take a leaf, break a leaf, and smell that. That's where it gets its name. It has a very citrusy smell. It's a little bitter this late in the season, but in the springtime, you can smell, like on a warm spring day, walking through the woods, as it starts to heat up, you can smell that citrusy smell coming off these leaves, and it's really beautiful. And it's easy to identify if you like hiking in March, because it is one of the first blooming species. So we have bees that they only live for a few weeks. So they emerge in early March, they buzz around, they feed, they mate, they die. This is one of the few plants that are blooming. So it's a great addition to your garden to provide food for that early emerging critters. And it's another one where you get a great red color in the fall. So it is a crawling species. It will root along the stem. You can see some of the fine roots coming off of the stem. And what else? I think that's it. Yeah. And did we start? Yeah, we got one more here. Oak sedge, another one of my favorites. Here, we can start this one. So like tussock sedge, this is a great one to plant close together and create that green mulch. However, oak sedge prefers shade and dry soils. How many of you have got that in your yard? Right? What grows there? Nothing, but oak sedge will. So it's a great plant for that. It also provides cover for a lot of insects. It feeds leaf hoppers and grasshoppers. So it is an important part of the system. Oak sedge will only get about 10 inches long and then it flops over. So I recommend that you don't mow it because it is a bunching plant. And so when you mow it, it has a bunch here and then, 9 inches, a bunch there. So you've got some open dirt in there. Downy phlox is a great little plant that you find out in the woods. It's an early blooming species, and it's a long bloomer, and it has a lot of blooms for the size plant that it is. So it's one of those plants that is more sensitive to other aggressive species. So you need to put it in an area where, other species aren't going to roll in and take it over. In my own yard, I just keep hacking back stuff that's coming a little too close just to give it a chance. And lastly, we have wild geranium. So if you've ever walked or biked along the MKT trail from the Martin Luther King Memorial Park to Flat Branch, you most likely have seen this plant. So it's a spring blooming plant. It likes moist soils. It likes to be in the woods, part sun, and it's a beautiful addition to perennial borders. So the leaves are they're palmate. It gets about 2 feet tall at the max, and it sends up a long shoot with a purplish pink flower on it. And those are the plants that I have for you. And so I've put stickers under 2 seats. Anyone have a sticker under your seat? All right, we got one. Oh, we got 2. Okay. Nope, just 2. All right. So, well, hold on before you thank me. These have come out of my yard. They've not been identified. So you've got to use what you've learned to identify them. And you have a lot of experts in the room to help you. So this is we can talk about these plants. Why not? Partridge pea. Yep. And so it's in the container is St. John's wort, which is a shrub. Doesn't look like it now because it's literally the size of my pinky finger. Yeah. But it is a awesome shrub that'll get about 3 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and the blooms, they look like truffula trees from the Lorax, if you remember that book. That's orange coneflower. So it's called orange coneflower, but it blooms yellow. This is cup plant. My cup plant is about 10 feet tall right now. And it's called cup plant because where the leaves meet the stem, it creates a cup. So when it rains, it holds water. So you'll find all kinds of frogs and wasps and bees, honeybees come to drink from the water. It's really a fun plant. And it spreads like crazy.
So is that the same thing as that?
Yep, you've got 2 cup plants here. Then this one and the rest, that other one, is called Golden Glow. It is a rudbeckia. It loves moist soils. You'll find it along the Hinkson Creek, and the leaves are edible, which Nadia will talk more about later this month. Well, I think I just identified all your plants for you.
I did some.
You did do some.
I did half of them.
You have any guesses?
Well, I think that's a wild strawberry.
Yeah, we'll give you that one. The tag's in there.
I can't think of the name of this.
That's an annual,
Yeah.
and it is a volunteer, so I didn't plant it in there. That's Daisy Fleabane. Mm-hmm. And so these other ones, this is our prairie basket. This other one is called oxeye sunflower. So it too will get about 6 feet tall, and it will bloom. It's blooming right now, and it's big yellow sunflower, not the traditional like sunflower where you get seeds from, but for a native sunflower, it's about
Is it an annual or perennial?
perennial. Yeah, these are all perennials.
Yay. Perennials are like getting a gift every year.
Right?
Without work.
It gets bigger.
Right.
You want to take a sniff of that one, rub some leaves and smell that? Mhm.
Like marjoram, but it's not. I don't know.
This is hairy mountain mint. So it is in the mint family. Lots of people get scared when you say mint.
I know this one's
Yeah, it is a bunching plant, and it will seed. And I actually pulled this out of my husband's vegetable garden. But my mint has been in place for several years, and so you can control it. You can use the leaves for tea. It makes a very refreshing iced tea, hot tea, and Nadia will definitely talk more about that later in the month. And we already said it, we have wild strawberry in here. So wild strawberries are very small, but very tasty. So if you have a lot of them, I plant them for ground cover in my prairie garden. So it chokes out a lot of weeds. And you get great berries that the little squirrels like to come and eat, and turtles, things like that. You have a rattlesnake master in there. That's this one right here. And lastly, let's see. Any guesses? You can.
I think it's in my yard, but no, I
It
don't
looks
know.
like milkweed.
Nope. So this, if you feel it, it's fuzzy. It's kind of sandpapery. This is gray-headed coneflower. So it's those floppy blooms. Let's see. This is what it'll turn into. And it is a prolific seeder. I love it. It makes great cut plants, obviously. And yeah, bees love them. And it gets its name, gray-headed coneflower, because these seed heads will turn gray when they're ripe and ready to go. So if you want to control the spread, I just collect the seeds. But also finches, all kinds of birds love them too. So those are our plants.
We do have a variety of plants around the room. Thank you, Kathy. Several people donated plants, and we just want you to see them and understand, because I've been weeding out plants that I didn't know were native. So I'm learning. So take some time and, look through. Most of them have names on them, on the pot that
No,
they're in.
it's all yours.
Yes, you have a question? Oh, thank you.
Yes, this is time for questions. We are at 10:55, so we've got 5 minutes. I'll be here later if you want to stay, but once 11 o'clock rolls around, feel free to get up and leave.
We'll see you next Saturday, same time, same place.
If you buy the black oil seed sunflower seeds, that's the sunflower seeds that grow the shorter sunflowers, and 80% of the mites that bees are dying from get killed off by the bees eating those particular seeds. I learned that from somebody who's really smart in the field who just learned that too. Scientific papers.
Thank you. Questions? Anyone have a question?
I heard you mention that you kind of cut things around the plants that you're hoping to give them a chance. I have killed back some beds with plastic and then planted them with wildflower seeds. If I keep the grasses that want to get in there cut back, will they eventually leave since they're not seeding? Or, if I mow high, will that help the not the plants I don't want in there to not seed, will they go away?
I was just thinking about the photosynthesis of plants. So to me, in my layperson's opinion, if there's no leaf, then there won't be any photosynthesis, there won't be a plant.
And yeah, and that is the idea. So you're talking about an area that you've killed everything off and then you've thrown down seed. Well, you thought you did. Yeah, see, that's, and we'll talk more about this in the workshop when we do site preparation. But in short, you want to make sure you kill as much off as possible, because then you have this issue where you've seeded your natives and now some non-native grasses are coming in, probably Bermuda and crabgrass, things like that. Probably, and they're rhizomatous, and so they spread like crazy, and they're really hard to get rid of. And I mean, there are, you can pull it to your heart's desire, but it's one of those things where I kind of have to embrace the chaos that it is, and do what I can to keep things back. You could start over again, which is really hard to hear, I know, but sometimes that's what we have to do. So yes, it is being recorded, and we will post it online, and so you'll be able to watch it and catch up. How many sessions? So we'll be doing 3 more of these sessions next week. Sajo from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, she's right there. She'll be talking about the benefits of native plants in the city. And then I'll be talking again the weekend following that about native landscape design. And then Nadia will follow up at the end of the month on the 29th with native edibles. Following July, we're going to be doing our outdoor workshops, where right in the back, the Friendship Community Garden, we're going to be preparing and planting a native landscape there all together. So, yeah, so that's...
So I've gotten a great idea for an area that is dry and under a tree and looks terrible. And I've been trying to figure out what to do with it. And you said the oak sedge. Is it too late to plant that now? Or should I wait?
Plant now or wait. I say wait, especially with the temperatures and the drought that we've been having. I think she's walked out now, but that's one of my main defenses against starting a garden and having it die off, is plant it in the fall. So in the fall, native plants, as long as the ground isn't frozen, you can put a native plant in there, give it a little bit of water, and then it'll get a head start for the next spring, and you won't have to water it and care for it as much throughout the summer, because this is... like Dee said, it's becoming a trend. I would expect these hotter temperatures to occur again.
Do you keep it in the ground over winter, or do you put it in a pot?
Great question. Keep it in the ground. Yeah. So they want to be in the ground. They'll start growing those roots. They may not look like they're doing much. They may look terrible when you put them in, but they're working on that root system. So that's the one of the beauties of native plants, is they have adapted to these terrible climate. Well, not terrible. We love Missouri, but you know what I mean. So they put all their energy into the first few years into growing their root systems, and then they grow everything above the ground. So just give them a little bit of time. But
so over the winter, do you have to cover it or protect it in any way from the cold above ground while it's doing the root growing down in the bottom?
So it will go dormant once it reaches a certain temperature, depending on the plant. I leave my leaves. I may rake my leaves out of the, grassy area of the yard, but I put my leaves in my flower beds, and that it insulates the soil. It insulates and keeps all of the insects that have fallen off of my native plants, and they're now buried in there. That's where they're overwintering. So if you want more butterflies and moths and fun things like that, leave the leaves. All right. Thank you all so very much. See you next weekend.